You're listening to the Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent C optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues in the mainframe, and how BMC AMI solutions can help you make change your competitive advantage.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Modern Mainframe. I'm Matt Dallaire. If you've been anywhere around the mainframe space in recent years, you've heard a lot of discussion about an impending demographic change on the platform, as seasoned veterans with decades of experience retire or move on, and a new generation of mainframe stewards take up the mantle. As you've probably seen yourself, this isn't so much a sudden change. At some point in the future, it's been happening for years. Today, BMC Technology Solutions Director and DevOps Evangelist Tony Anter is leading a roundtable discussion with some relatively newer, but still veteran in their own right, mainframers about their experiences on the platform and how it can appeal to those coming out of school or looking for a career change. Joining us for the discussion are BMC Associate Solution Engineer Rachel Clevenger and Senior Associate Software Consultants Nick Guillemette and Dakota Locklear. So Tony, Rachel, Nick, Dakota, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
So Tony, I'll turn it over to you to lead the conversation.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt. So I think Matt set the stage pretty well, but I don't think there's anybody in this space who isn't understanding the brain drain, the retirements, the skills gap. There's a number of different names for, where the industry is going. But as Matt said, you're losing your SMEs and you're finding it harder and harder to replace them with newer in career employees. And so what I wanted to do was basically invite some people that I know that are solid mainframe engineers, but who I would think most would consider are newer in career or newer to the mainframe platform, and talk to them about how they got onto this platform, which you typically don't see a lot of newer people, at least not traditionally, coming onto this platform. So with that said, let me go ahead and jump right in. So I'll throw this out to the group, and whoever wants to take a stab at it, or let's have each one of you take a stab at it. Describe how you started your journey onto the mainframe, and how did you end up on the mainframe platform versus going into mobile or cloud or another type of IT field?
I can start.
Yeah, great, Rachel. Go ahead.
So I studied math and computer science when I was in college, and immediately after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I moved to Detroit. And in downtown Detroit is CompuWare. I had my second interview ever post-college at CompuWare. And I knew nothing about the mainframe, honestly, at that point. I had one professor mention the mainframe. He called it a dinosaur and said, we never have to think about it again. So I wasn't really sure what to expect. But when I went in for my interview, it was an all-day thing. I totally fell in love with the work culture at CompuWare. Everyone was wonderful to be around. It had a startup feel. And I decided to go with my gut that it felt like the right place and take on the challenge of learning this whole new technology.
Wow, and that's really cool. And when we talk about culture being key, that's a perfect example of it. How about you, Dakota or Nick? Why don't you guys describe how you got into the mainframe?
Sure. Yeah, and it's a similar story to Rachel. Out of college, just had graduated and had an interview at CompuWare. Had the interview, and when you mentioned the mainframe, I had really no idea. In school, it wasn't really talked about. I didn't necessarily know, what it was used for. Didn't know much about it. So, I had the interview, and during that interview, I could see ties to, what I was studying in school with computer science. And I seen some overlap there. So, I accepted the job at CompuWare, and I worked initially in support there of the tools.
Okay. How about you, Nick?
So my bowling coach in college, he owned the pro shops that I worked at, etc. And he was actually a support manager working at CompuWare, and he offered up to all the people on his team, hey, we have this internship program that might be useful for you guys, and offered it up to everyone. And I took the bait and joined the team. At one point I said, what is a mainframe? And he said, well, maybe this isn't for you. And I said, no, like, let me take a look. And just kind of fell in love with the whole concept of, we run the world and people don't know it. So that's kind of how I got started, was through an internship in college, and I've just kind of kept going.
So it sounds to me, Nick, like you were recruited. Did you actually get, did you have any IT training, or were you a developer before you came onto the platform, or did you sort of start cold, for lack of a better term?
Right. So I started as an intern. I had lots of training and schooling through college in the distributed space, but had never even heard of the mainframe or anything. This was just kind of something that he threw out as, hey, we have this awesome internship program if anyone's interested. And I was the only one who kind of bid onto that. So, but yes, had lots of training in the distributed space through college, and Java, C++, C#, what have you, in those times, but no mainframe. So yeah, he just kind of threw it out there if anyone's interested. And once I got involved, I just thought it was a super interesting space, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. Okay. So Rachel and Dakota, were you guys recruited by CompuWare at the time, or was this you answered, for lack of a better term, a job ad?
Yeah, I just applied on the website. There were a company in Detroit, and I was working in Detroit. So.
Yep, and similar for me too. I was applying to jobs that were, around where I lived, just outside of Detroit at the time, and CompuWare just happened to be perfect, right downtown. So I had applied there, and that's kind of where it started.
But I mean, the interesting thing is you guys didn't have any formal mainframe training. It's not like you were, you had taken COBOL or you had any specifics. You were really just generalists as far as developers or IT professionals went.
Exactly.
You came onto the platform and just sort of got it, right?
Well, I wouldn't say I just got it. There was a huge learning curve at first, especially before I was introduced to the wonderful world of Topaz Workbench, now just Workbench. Everything felt incredibly foreign at first, even just trying to log on to the mainframe. Didn't make a lot of sense to me, didn't feel intuitive. So that learning curve was a challenge, but once you get past a certain point, you start to get it, things start to click, and you can kind of shift your thinking towards mainframe.
What were you were going to say something in there too, Dakota?
Yeah, when I first started, working on the green screen, right, the ISPF interface, it's intimidating, right? It's a green screen, looks a bit archaic, but how I was able to learn quicker was, we had these modern interfaces, Eclipse, VS Code, etc. So I was able to leverage some of my existing knowledge of these IDEs to interface with the mainframe, and that helped speed up how quick I was able to learn.
Completely agree. On my first day of my internship, they showed me the 3270 interface, and this is how you can log in, and blah, blah, blah. And when I went home, I was like, you know what? I don't know why I took this job. Like, this doesn't seem right for me. And the next day they were like, hey, gotcha. Like, actually, we have all this awesome stuff. And then they showed us how to access things through things like Eclipse or VS Code. And I was like, okay, like, I can develop on this platform. But at first I was definitely a little bit like shook. Like, I don't really think that's for me. So I think that's something huge for new and career developers.
So the mantra we've been talking about newer developers wanting the tools they were used to, at least in your three cases, that was absolutely the truth. Is that an act? Would you say that's a true statement?
Definitely.
100%.
So we talked about the interface and ISPF, and Rachel mentioned it as a learning curve, but so I look at that as a roadblock But what other roadblocks did you have? Was that the only one that you had to overcome, or were there other nuances to it that you felt you weren't ready for?
Yeah, I would say, there's a ton of different technologies that I was not exposed to, in university. For example, Kix, IMS, etc. Right? All these different mainframe technologies that I wasn't really, aware of or knew existed. So that was, certainly steepened the learning curve a bit.
I would also say there kind of feels like a lack of tooling for teaching yourself. When I was learning everything, I took it upon myself to figure out how to install all the products on my own and things like that. And I ended up having to ask for help from my colleagues all of the time. And thankfully, I had them to teach me. But, the tools out there to teach yourself, I would say, is kind of lacking.
Do you think that's still the case, Rachel, or do you think things have improved there?
There's definitely been improvement. Now I'm so immersed, I don't really know how the people on the outside of the mainframe world are experiencing it. Like if someone decided they wanted to teach themselves about the mainframe, I don't know how easy it would be for them to access the information that they needed.
Did you guys have a similar experience, Dakota and Nick?
Mine was a little bit different. So when I started, they set me up with the red books, right? As far as ZOS specific knowledge is concerned. So I kind of just dove in and tried to figure out what this platform is. And as I've advanced more and more and interacting with different subsystems, et cetera, like Kix, DB2, IMS, what have you, I've just tried to look out and see what's available. I agree with Rachel. It's not easy to just pick up on these things, but there is some stuff available out there to get you a starting point. But ultimately, unless you're, hands-on interacting with these systems, that's the key. You got to get hands-on and just play around with these systems. Obviously not your production systems, but systems right. that are available to you, and just kick the tires on some things, try some things out. That's what I found has worked for me anyway.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too. I thought, when I started working on the mainframe, I think in addition to the red book and getting hands-on and things, it was the people around me, the more senior people. I could, go out and, ask them questions, and they were always a great resource for me. So, I think it's always important to leverage those resources that you have around you.
Yeah, I know when in my career, when I've dealt with new hires and people, one of the first things I really had to teach them was to be comfortable asking questions, right? Be comfortable going to someone who's more senior, who has the knowledge. And what I've found is 9 times out of 10, if you come and ask a question and you've tried to do it yourself and just hit a wall, most people are more than happy to help you. So let me ask another question that I think is probably on a lot of people's minds, or at least on my mind. Let me say it that way. So hopefully there are other people. So you guys have a decent amount of experience at this point, just with IT in general. And, Rachel and Nick and Dakota, it all sounds like you also have some training in the distributed space. What kept you on this platform? I get that you applied for a job and it was in downtown Detroit, but now that you have some experience, it would probably be pretty easy, over the years for you guys to have jumped onto another platform or moved off into cloud or mobile or, some of the other hot platforms that are out there. What kept you on the mainframe? What kept you doing what you do?
So, I think one of the coolest things about the mainframe is, you're running mission critical applications, right? And so these are some of the largest companies, organizations in the world, right? So, I feel like, the work we do here has an impact globally, right? I feel like there's a big impact that we make here with different solutions. So, that's just exciting to me. That's attractive to me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. For me, it's this platform runs the world. Nobody really knows about it. People do, but nobody I talk to really knows about it. And so that's just been fun to share like what we do. And that's what it has kept me around is we run the world. Nobody knows about it, but we have some powerful stuff. So that's what's kept me around.
I completely agree with Dakota and Nick's sentiments. Another thing is that, the mainframe world is transforming where we're modernizing. That's the thing I push with our customers, modernization, modern processes, and it's exciting to be a part of that. Exciting to talk about DevOps and getting away from waterfall and all of that. Important transformations are happening at customers on the mainframe, and I enjoy being a part of that.
So that brings up another question that I had, which is, describe to someone who isn't familiar with the platform, what is the culture like? What is the culture on the mainframe like when you started? And where do you see the culture on the mainframe going?
Oh, it's constantly changing. New tools are being developed. People talk about modernizing the mainframe, but I think the mainframe is the most modern platform that's out there. Things are constantly evolving. Sure, you're working on some old COBOL, PL1, what have you code, but things are constantly changing. We're adapting to the new technologies that are available and automating things. So that's what I've loved about working on this platform.
How about Rachel or Dakota? Did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, over the last 5 years or so that I've been here, you've seen different customers go on, a modernization journeys, right? To modernize their tooling, etc. And I think in terms of the culture, there's a lot of mainframe shops that I think are, still stagnant in a sense. Is that they don't want to change anything, and you see some others that are going on these modernization efforts. So it's very interesting.
One example that I can give is I was a systems programmer for several years, and in that group, I witnessed all of my fellow systems programmers who were all, older than me, later in career than I was. They pretty much all use Workbench now. They have gone from being pure green screen to doing as much as they can in Workbench if possible. So it's been a major shift towards our tools, even for systems programmers, not just for developers.
Wow. Okay. So you're seeing a lot more adoption of the modern tooling, modernization practices, I'll almost say.
Yeah. Even from, the guys that you think would be the most resistant to change.
Right. They're awesome at doing certain things like in their ISPF environment, but there's some capabilities that are just not possible within that environment. So they found some value in that and have been able to continue doing what they're doing in the environment they're used to.
So what do you guys say to the ISPF developer, 30 plus years of experience, who says, I can go faster and I'm better at ISPF than any IDE, anything, any modern tools out there? Like, how do you guys address that when you go out and talk to customers?
So how I look at it is these people are wizards in ISPF 3270, whatever name we want to call it. These people are wizards. They're super fast at what they're able to do in development and investigating, looking at impact of their changes, etc. But a lot of people, people that are newer to an application or newer in career don't have that experience and don't have the ability to use 3270 to look at those certain things. So I've seen the modern tooling make it a lot easier to look at, okay, if I make a change to this is the scope of what's going to happen when I make that change, and have the ability to look at what the impact of my change is on this application. Where if I'm just going through 3.4, which some people are wizards at and are able to whiz around and figure out all the impacts of everything, as a new and career person, I haven't been able to do that. And I found this type of tooling made it a lot easier for me to see the impact of my changes on what exactly am I doing to this application.
Can I jump in with a question? Have any of you noticed when you're working with the people, like Tony mentioned, who are kind of sticking with the ISPF, has there been any kind of leadership on your part, or has it been seeping over where seeing you work with the newer tools and the success you can have with them, where they're starting to kind of warm to the idea?
Absolutely. I think seeing me be able to just drag and drop a data set between LPARs, there's no denying that that's faster than what you would do in ISPF. Like, it's just, you can't argue that. So yeah, leading by example, doing things faster than they do, gets them interested.
That'll convince people every time.
Yeah.
So one of the things I hear out there, and it's related to what we're talking about right now, but one of the big questions or statements I hear talking to customers is they can't find, it's not even the platform. They can't find COBOL developers. They can't find qualified COBOL developers. So from your experience, since you all had to sort of step in and learn COBOL, how difficult was that? How hard was it being someone who's never been on the platform and never really, I'm going to assume, never written any major COBOL? How hard or easy was it for you guys to come on board and pick that up?
I think if you can learn Java, if you can learn Python, you can learn C, which is what we all did in college, you can learn COBOL.
So it's just another language.
It's just another language.
Yeah. What I'll say is, I don't think COBOL, like the language itself, is a problem. The problem has been what has been done with the language, which has made it super complex and understanding what I'm looking at before I develop on it, right? So I don't think COBOL is a problem. It's just another language. Most developers these days are willing to learn a bunch of languages, and they're actively seeking to learn a bunch of different languages. So COBOL isn't the problem. What we've done with it is the problem, and we're actively looking to help out in modernizing that.
Yeah, and it helps that it's, human readable, right? Like it reads as plain English, COBOL.
Okay, so you guys didn't find any more difficulty in doing COBOL, if I'm hearing you correctly, than you did Python or Java or any other, I'll say, quote-unquote, modern language?
Not at all.
So let me ask this question, or maybe this is more of a wrap-up thing, but what advice would you give to someone who's new in career who wanted to come onto this platform, who wanted to go into the mainframe?
The advice I would give, as I said earlier, was to leverage your resources around you. Ask questions, be curious, get hands-on with the mainframe, whether that's through a modern IDE or the green screen, and just go out there and be hands-on, play around, and there's a lot of documentation out there to reference too. So just using your resources is probably my biggest piece of advice.
How about you, Rachel?
I agree with Dakota. In terms of getting your foot in the door somewhere, getting to actually start working with mainframes, I think starting in tech support is a great place to start. That's how I started my career. It led me to becoming a systems programmer and now a solution engineer. And I was able to devour as much of the technology as possible in that, work environment, office environment, while I was in tech support, and fall in love with the technology, and everything sort of unrolled after that. But tech support's a good place to start.
So let me turn that question around, and from another perspective, what advice would you give to organizations that are looking to bring newer, younger developers onto their, as you said, your most critical platform?
So what I would say is that a lot of the job postings that I see list things out like you need experience with JCL and Rex and COBOL and PL1 and DB2, what have you. What attracted me to the mainframe was I saw things like, we're doing DevOps, like we have automated pipelines, we're modernizing what we're doing. So I would encourage companies in their job postings to push the things that can attract younger or new in career people to the platform, and that we're doing the same thing you're doing in the distributed world. It's just a different language where I see most job postings are, you need COBOL, PL1, DB2, kicks, blah, blah, blah. So that's my suggestion for organizations is pitch the modern stuff and attract some of the new and career crowd.
Okay. Dakota, how about you? You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just kind of piggyback on what Nick had said. I think the most important thing would be to have modern tooling available, so you can recruit newer developers or early into career developers. And when they, join the team, they can leverage these modern tools to be productive quicker, right? So instead of having to go in, learn the green screen, learn the different ISPF commands, you go into a modern IDE, you're already familiar with that because that's likely what you used in university. And now everything becomes a lot easier, right? You're put into an environment where you're familiar. And, that, at least for me, allowed me to expedite my learning in the mainframe.
I would say the three most important things, obviously, first of all, modern tooling, but you should also have modern processes that go along with those tools. So practicing what you preach and modern workplace culture. Be a fun place to work, be a positive place to work, have that startup feel, like CompuWare did. Those are the three most important things for me.
That's great. And I think that is fantastic advice, too, because I think sometimes people underplay culture as a driver in this versus, technology or whatever. And I think if you have an awesome culture, it really doesn't matter the technology that you're working on. That's my experience. But then again, we're not here to talk to me because I'm an older guy. We're here to talk to you.
No, totally agree. Like, we got to be all in or all out. Like, let's go.
Oh, I love that. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you all for coming and having this chat. And I think a lot of organizations are going to find this a very valuable discussion. Matt, I'll hand it back over to you.
All right. Thanks. And I reiterate to Rachel, Nick, Dakota, thank you. And thank you, Tony, for leading the discussion. Thank you also to everyone listening. I'll include some links in the show notes that you might find useful. So be sure to check for those. And with that, another episode of the Modern Mainframe comes to a close. We'll talk to you next time. Until then, take care.
You're listening to the Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent C optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues in the mainframe and how BMC AMI solutions can help you make change your competitive advantage.